Welcome, everyone. I'm Kate Day, Chair of Cheshire County Republicans, and we're so happy to have Governor Christie back in town again. And now that you all just sat down, I want you to rise, and we're all going to say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now you may have a seat again. I do want to welcome everyone, not just to here, but to the Republican Party. And if you want to get involved, contact me anytime. And for right now, I'm going to introduce our National Committee woman for the RNC in New Hampshire, Juliana Bergeron. I can never get that.
And I have a really to introduce Governor Christie, but how many people have seen the governor before? Yeah, this is New Hampshire, and I'm glad we've got a lot of first-time visitors today. I am not going to waste your time by telling you about him. I'm going to let him tell you about himself. So, Governor Christie, help me welcome him.
All right, good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Kate and Juliana, thank you. They have been extraordinarily warm and welcoming to me and to Mary Pat. Mary Pat's doing her own thing now. She's now been to New Hampshire 52 days herself, so she now gets to do her own events. So she's in Nashua doing her own thing this morning, and we'll hook up later this afternoon at another town hall meeting that we're going to do later in the day where she'll be with me. So I bring regards from Mary Pat, and she is off talking to voters in Nashua this morning. I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, and most importantly, to answer your questions as we go forward this morning. I'm not going to give a big speech off the top. I'm going to just say a couple of things that I want you all to think about as you're making your decisions between now and next Tuesday. The first is that I watched a little bit of that Democratic town hall last night. I'm sorry, I just couldn't help myself, and it is extraordinary to me the lengths to which Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders are going to try to outspend your money for themselves. I mean, it is amazing how many things they're going to give to the American people for free. Now, you know, of course, that there's nothing for free in this world, and that when Democratic politicians tell you that they're going to give you something for free, put your hand on your wallet immediately, because they're coming for your money to pay for their promises. And Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders last night were doing the same things over and over again. You know, the essence of this race in the fall is going to be, who do you trust more? The people of the United States or the government of the United States? I mean, that became even clearer to me listening to them last night. They believe the government is the solution to every problem and is the creator of every opportunity. And I just don't believe that. And I became a Republican because I didn't believe that. Because I believe that the creators of opportunity in this country are the people of this country. That the way you pick winners and losers in this country is not by having the government do it, but by having the power of your ideas and the depth of your work ethic be the thing that determines who wins and who loses in this country. And they're trying to take that away. And so we need to make sure that as a party, we unite behind those principles, because it's extraordinarily important. And I think it'll be the most powerful argument that we can make against Secretary Clinton or Senator Sanders, whoever turns out to be the nominee in the fall. It seems to me pretty clear that that's going to be Secretary Clinton. He may have a little bump here next week, potentially. You all giving him the good neighbor policy. But other than that, I don't see where Bernie Sanders goes from here. But his philosophy is clearly, you know, something that's going to continue to affect Secretary Clinton, because she's moved even further and further towards giving the free stuff away. Second thing I wanted to raise to you, too, is to understand that on our side of the ledger, this is now a choice. You know, shopping time is running out. Just a few days left for your primary shopping season. And so now it's time for choice. And there is a real choice in this election. There really is. It's a choice between those, because let's face it, there's very small differences between us on our ideas on issues. There are some, and some of those issues are important differences, but they're not nearly as large as the differences that will exist between ourselves and Secretary Clinton in the fall. So what is the choice? The choice is, who do you want sitting behind that desk when the real crises come? And they will come. We may be able to anticipate some of them we won't be able to anticipate, but we know that those crises will come. And we've watched now for the last 7 years a president who did not know how to deal with crisis. He did not know how to deal with challenge. And we should have known that, because we elected a first-term United States senator who had never managed anything bigger than a 30-person Senate staff and had never been challenged in any way. And then we gave him the most complex management job in the entire world, and we wondered why he couldn't do it. Well, he couldn't do it because he's never done it. And the presidency of the United States is not a place for on-the-job training. And so there is a real choice here. And yeah, I have spoken a lot about Senator Rubio the last 2 days because I think it's an important choice you're making between Senator Rubio and me, or Senator Cruz and me. Because those guys, while they're both good people, they are not ready to be president of the United States. I was watching television this morning before I actually was on television, on a few shows, and I saw Senator Santorum on Morning Joe, and they asked him to name one accomplishment of Senator Rubio's career. Now, this is a guy who's run for president twice and endorsed him yesterday. He couldn't come up with one. He said, well, he won an election in 2010 in Florida that was very tough. Well, okay. Nobody gets into office without winning a tough election. The job of being in public life is not winning elections. It's once you win the election, what do you do? And his own supporter, not me, his own supporter couldn't come up with one accomplishment. Here's the thing. That's not the basis to be president of the United States. You know, a winning smile and a good read off a teleprompter or a set of notes is good, but what will that do for you in a crisis? See, the choices here are too important and too big for us to back away, for us to take the easy way out. So over the next 5 days, I'm going to make sure you all understand what the choice is. Then you get to make it. And that's the beauty of the New Hampshire primary and the beauty of this country, is that I get to present the choice as the candidate. You get to make the choice as the voter. And as long as you make that choice based upon those things, then I'm going to be absolutely comforted to be governed by whatever your choice is, because it's real important. Who is comfortable making, who's tough in a crisis, who will represent us to the rest of the world in a way that makes America stronger, not weaker, and in a way that will help to empower the American people to make the decisions to make regarding their families and their futures through economic strength and great education, children and our grandchildren. Take your questions. He's taking your questions and giving you full and complete answers. The 60-second sound baits on Saturday night. You'll get a full answer, because that's what you deserve for showing up. And my job when I show up is to make sure that I treat you with the kind of respect that a full answer gives you. So we're going to do that now. Only one rule. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. After that, we're ready to go. So we'll start with you, sir.
We're a small local employer here. We have small business, my understanding, hires more people in this country, I'm wearing my flag,
Yep.
just like you, than anybody else. We're having a heck of a time. We're installing products that are made overseas that are inferior. They're products that have been mandated by the government, such as no-lead brass, that can't be made here because of regulations. Us as a small employer having quite a time staying ahead of everything. Nobody's talking about small business. the major employer of the country. We're all talking about big business. We're talking about government, talking about government employees. Nobody said a word about small business. What's going to change from what we've seen in the last literally 8 to 10 years that's killing our business? I'm not having my kid involved. I don't see the future here.
Yep. Listen, thank you. Thank you for raising the issue. It's really important. And we have talked about it, but we need to talk about it more. I think the single biggest thing we can do to help small business in this country is to pare back on the regulation that you just talked about. And I mean that specific one. I mean the torrent of regulation that has come your way, especially in the last 7 years. In 2014, which is the last year we have full statistics for this, the Obama administration issued 81,000 new pages of federal regulation. 81,000 pages of new federal regulation. I forget about who writes that. Who reads it? Right? I mean, 81,000 pages? You know, it makes War and Peace look like People magazine. I mean, you know, it's and the part of it that's not funny is that you've got to comply with it. And it affects your business. And I will tell you, the Small Business Administration right now is telling us that the average cost for a small business owner in the United States for complying with federal regulation is $10,000 per employee. By the time you factor in all the things you have to do, right, to stay current with that. And if you're a manufacturer in this country, it's $34,000 per employee. That's right. You know, people talk about why manufacturers are leaving. The biggest reason manufacturers are leaving is because we make it too expensive for them to operate. And they can't make a fair profit. So they go to another country where they're not going to be regulated that much. So let me tell you what I did in New Jersey and then what I'll do as president. In New Jersey, my first executive order I signed on my first day in office was to freeze any new regulation from any department or agency of the state government for 90 days. And in that 90 days, to send my lieutenant governor out and to meet with small business owners across the state of New Jersey. And what we told them, the instruction, the advertising we put out for the meetings, and they were all public meetings, was bring with us the list of the regulations that you've had to comply with or been affected by that have been the most expensive, driven you the most crazy, and you think have the least usefulness for the public. Well, they came in droves to these meetings, and they brought lists. And by the end of our first year, we eliminated 1/3 of all the regulation that had been put in place by my predecessor with the stroke of a pen. Because as governor, you could do that, and you could do the same thing as president. So I'm going to do the same thing as president, except we're going to freeze it for 180 days because the government of the United States is a heck of a lot bigger than the government of New Jersey. A lot more to do, and 81,000 pages is something that's fairly daunting. But you know what? We're going to do the same kind of thing. I'd send my vice president out to make public meetings all over the country to meet not with the major corporations, but with small business owners. Because it's the small business owners, if we fix their problems, we can fix the economy's problems. That's the bottom line. And for me, going out and meeting with small business owners will be the thing that will give us the best education for what's really ailing this country from an economic perspective. Last part of it is this. There are tax changes we can make too that'll help, but I don't think that's the biggest problem. I think the regulation is the biggest problem. It's the hidden tax. Everyone's willing to pay their taxes. We like to pay less, and in my administration, we will pay less. But that's not the biggest thing that's bugging you and that's holding you back. The wet blanket on all this is the huge amount of regulation. But the last part of it is this. The most disturbing thing that I heard you say in a couple of paragraphs of disturbing things to hear was that you weren't getting your family involved in your business. That means you don't see a future for it. And the sad thing for that is that that lack of hope is what this president has squeezed out of people. Mr. Hope and Change has squeezed the hope out of small business owners around this country who I'm sure feel like you, that what you want for your children is the very best that they can have. And if you don't believe your business is the very best that can be for them, as you thought it was when you got into it, well, then that's an enormously sad circumstance and one that a president has to try and change because that squeezes the spirit out of families. And that's a much bigger thing than any of the other stuff that we talked about because that spirit of the family is one that is what's made this country the most unique place in the world in history because we believe that it will be better for the next generation than it's been for us. And for the first time, I'm sensing in our generation mine and yours, we're wondering.
Your kid going in politics?
God, I hope not. God, I hope not. You know, I tell him all the time. You know, my oldest is a son. He's a senior in college, and he's trying to decide, you know, whether to go to law school or not. And his father's a lawyer, and I said to him, you know, take your time. You know, go out and get a job first. Go out and work a little bit before you decide whether you want to go to graduate school or not. And it's the same kind of feeling that I'm conveying to him that you're conveying to your children. It's not as easy as following in our footsteps anymore because of some of the things that have happened in this country. So we want them to think and consider other things, right? Because what we want for them more than anything else is the best. And yeah, you know, I enjoy what I do, and I think I make a real difference, but I'm ready to have my son look at his options, as you are probably ready to let your children look at their options.
The best for them going forward.
Yep.
And the current trending is not the best.
It is not, and I agree with you. But the first way to fix that is to try to fix this regulatory system, which, again, goes back to what I said in the beginning, which is it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy about whether you think the government is the best people to make all these decisions or whether you're the best person to make these decisions. And I quite frankly don't think the government has any business making your decisions in your business. You should be making them. You're the one putting the risk on the line, putting your labor on the line, putting your money on the line, putting your time and your life on the line. No one's got more of a stake in your business than you do. Certainly not the government. So you raise a really good point, and that's what I'll do to try to change it. You're welcome. Other questions? Yes, ma'am, all the way in the back there. Good morning.
My husband and their father, my son, are both police officers. A lot of news lately with bad names, bad raps for police officers. Can I trust you to work hard to restore the public's faith in trust in our police officers and our law enforcement officers, as this administration has worked so hard to restore?
You know, such a good point. Listen, I spent 7 years of my life in law enforcement. I was the United States Attorney for New Jersey for 7 years before I became governor. And so I got the opportunity to work not only with federal agents, but with local police officers as well. And I think it is simply one of the 2 or 3 most disgraceful parts of this administration, is that every time there's a benefit of the doubt to be given, this president never gives it to police officers. He always takes the opposite side. And the FBI director has now said that as a result, there's a chill wind blowing through law enforcement. Law enforcement officers afraid to get out of their cars, afraid to do their jobs, not because they fear being hurt, because they know they confront that every day. It's because they fear being ostracized by a political system that does not any longer respect what they do. And, you know, I'll just be real clear about this. The 7 years I spent as U.S. Attorney were the 7 best years of my career. I loved it every minute of every day that I did it because all we had to worry about was doing the right thing. Not have to worry about politics or anything else. We just had to worry about doing the right thing. We're taking that away from our police officers. Absolutely right. We're taking that away from them, and I want to tell you, when I'm President of the United States, I will restore it. I'll restore it not only because it's better for our society, I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. Tell them, thank them for their service from me. Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi. I'm Jerry Day. I live here in Keene. I have been in the past, I've been employed in the healthcare system. And I noticed recently there's a lot of emphasis on your health and its effect that it would have on your presidency. So my question is, have you had a clear physical recently that clears you
Yeah.
of all health problems?
Yeah. Yeah. And first of all, thank you for asking. Because that comes from a place of caring and compassion, and I appreciate that. Yeah, for a 53-year-old guy that sleeps like 3-4 hours a night, I'm doing really well. And the fact is that I'm a lot different than I was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I made the decision. It'll be 3 years ago. In 2 weeks. I made the decision after struggling with my weight for 20 years to go and have surgery. And I had lap band surgery 3 years ago. And I've lost a significant amount of weight, as you all probably can tell from looking at me, from when I came up here to New Hampshire 4 years ago to campaign for Mitt Romney. And I did it for one reason, because I have 4 children, and of those 4 children, I have 2 daughters, one who at the time was 16 and one who at the time was 9. And I want to be there to walk them down the aisle. Didn't have anything to do with politics. It has to do with my ability to be a father to my children. And so after struggling with that for a long time, now I see the doctor regularly. I've gotten a clean bill of health. My blood pressure is normal. My cholesterol is now actually low. And I feel really good. And it was a difficult decision for me to make. But it was a positive decision, not a defeatist decision. It was a decision that said, you know what, there's a tool out there that can help me to become healthier, and it's minimally invasive, and there's very low risk, and so I'm going to do it. And I was very fortunate to get hooked up with a wonderful surgeon in New York City who helped me. But when you're in public eye, it's kind of hard, right? I'll tell you a funny story about this. So, it's a personal thing, right? Even though you're a public figure, it's personal. And you don't want everybody to know. So I didn't tell anybody that I was going to do it. Except outside my family. My wife and my children knew. I went in for the surgery on a Saturday morning, and I went in under an assumed name with like sweatpants and a sweatshirt and a baseball hat on. I went into the hospital. Nobody saw me on the way in. My doctor met me out in front of the hospital with this like long kind of beat up looking overcoat and a wool cap on. He looked like a homeless person, not like a surgeon. And we went in and got it done. And for months, I didn't tell anybody. And then somehow it leaked out. I don't know how the press got a hold of it, but it leaked out. So then I started to talk about it publicly, because this has never been about my public life. It's always been about my personal life, my private life, and that's where your health matters the most. Because in the end, I'll be done with these jobs at some point in my life, as governor, as president, and what matters is, are you going to be there for your wife? Are you going to be there for your children? And hopefully someday for grandchildren. So yeah, I feel really good. I thank you for asking. The stress and strain of this campaign, or the job of president and the job of governor of New Jersey, has been one that I've been able to handle just fine. And I think I'll handle it just fine. The only thing you'll probably notice about me after my 8 years as president will be, like every other president, I'll look a lot grayer and a lot older. But that'll have very little to do with my weight or my health, and everything to do with just, like I said before, sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night. So thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
And thank you. And I want to say I also appreciate your sense of humor.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Ray. I'm a retired college instructor. How do you feel about Common Core and Park Festival? Do you think education should be under federal control or local control?
Education should be under local control. We tried Common Core in New Jersey. It didn't work, and so we've gotten rid of it. We're going to New Jersey-based standards that are being developed by both teachers and parents, along with administrators and our State Board of Education. They announced those New Jersey standards just about a month or so ago. And there's no doubt in my mind that education should be under local control for this reason. It's one of the most important things we have an opportunity to do. And when there's a problem, I want parents to be able to go to the local school board and raise a stink. And if those things are happening down at the Federal Department of Education, you got no hope of making a difference. And so it has to be done at the local level, and it has to be done in cooperation with the 3 groups that matter the most: parents, teachers, and administrators. They're the ones who have to have the input because they're the ones who are going to have to teach it, have to administer it, and the parents are going to want to have values that are going to be being reinforced by them at home. And if they don't agree with the ones being presented in the classroom, they won't reinforce them at home, and our children won't learn as well. So that's my view on Common Core and local education, and it should be a local decision. And as president, I would do everything I could to push more of those decisions down the line to the local level and away from the federal government. Thank you, sir. Sir.
Governor Kevin Simmons, how would you facilitate the federal government helping to nationalize addiction recovery on a national basis so we didn't have the split we have now between the states where you get good care in one state and across the border there's very little care?
Well, I've spoken a lot about this issue, and it's very important to me personally. But I don't think that a president can nationalize it from state to state. What the president can do is set an example at the federal level by allowing for treatment of those folks who get involved in the federal system, whether it's prisoners who get involved in the federal prison system who need treatment and making sure they're taken care of, setting up drug courts in the federal system so that when folks come through, we're not just looking at incarceration, but we're looking at treatment, and set that example. But I don't think you can impose upon each individual state what they need to do. I believe in the 10th Amendment, and I believe that states should be able to make their own judgments on these things. But one thing I will tell you for sure is I sense a movement in this country towards treatment of drug addiction. We're seeing too many deaths. We're seeing too much loss. And we're seeing finally and coming to grips with the idea that this, disease does not discriminate. So, this idea that somehow this is only uneducated folks or poor folks or folks from broken families, it's not true. It's everywhere, and it doesn't discriminate. And so I think you're seeing movements across this country. We've done it in New Jersey, and last year, for the first time in 4 years, we've had overdose deaths go down, not up. We're making progress. We're closing a state prison, and we're converting that state prison, because the prison population is lower, and we're converting that state prison into a fully certified drug treatment facility so that folks inside the criminal justice system who have time left on their sentence and have a drug addiction problem will be sent there for the last year of their sentence to get the tools and the treatment they need to hopefully be successful when they get back to the outside, so we don't see them back in jail. We see them as productive members of our society, but just as importantly, good mothers and fathers, good sons and daughters, good sisters and brothers. We need to keep our families whole and intact. This drug problem is ripping families apart, and that's the most tragic thing. And any family that's been affected by this knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so I'm not going to nationalize it by saying that we're going to impose standards on every state. I don't think that's what we should do. But we will set an example. And I will speak from behind the bully pulpit to make sure that folks hear that message and hear it loud and clear. And thanks for raising this important issue. Yes, sir.
Governor, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your efforts to lead this system. We all know that you appreciate that. Over this year, 4 of our Supreme Court justices are going to get pretty old. One's turning 78, 2 are turning 80, 1 is turning 83. I'm scared to death that the Democrat nominates 4 Supreme Court justices. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you're going to be looking for if you become president for Supreme Court nominations.
Really important issue, and you're right. Could be anywhere from 1 to 4 for the next president in their first term. And so I tell you this. First thing is, I want judges who interpret the law and interpret the Constitution and don't make new laws and new rights from the bench. No one's elected them. And as a result, no one can recall them. And so having those people with that type of, we make our judiciary have lifetime appointments so they won't be affected by politics, then they shouldn't be acting politically on the bench. And so I want people who are restrained in that regard, and we'll appoint people that way. If you're looking for an example of the kind of justice I'll appoint, my favorite justice and the guy who I'll look to is Justice Sam Alito. Justice Alito had the job I used to have before I had it. He was U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Then he was made Third Circuit Court of Appeals judge by President Bush 41, then put on the United States Supreme Court by President Bush 43. He is a quiet, consistent conservative. He interprets the law, he interprets the Constitution, and he does it in a way that is workmanlike. Not a lot of flourish, but there consistently on every important vote. So what I would do is I'd call my friend Justice Alito to the White House and I'd say to him, okay, who are the very best circuit court judges whose opinions you read all the time, who are just like you? Quiet, smart, consistent conservatives. Give me 4 or 5 names. I'll interview those folks, and those are the folks I'll pick from. Because I want someone with a paper trail. I don't want someone with no paper trail. I want someone with a paper trail whose opinions I can read and I can figure out what they're going to do or not do. And, you know, unfortunately, New Hampshire gave us somebody who we were told was a conservative, David Souter, and wound up voting consistently with the liberal side of the court. I'm certain one of President Bush 41's bigger regrets of his time in the White House, and I'm not going to make the same mistake by taking someone on faith, because I've found that when people are interviewing for a job, they'll say almost anything if they want to get the job. Yeah, exactly. So we're now going to try to do the best we can to make sure that the people that we hire have a record, so that we can judge their record on what kind of person they'd be on the Supreme Court, and that's what I'd look to do. Thank you, sir. All right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Governor Christie, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I had a question for you about what policies that you would enact as president to help combat religious persecution. According to Open Doors, three of the top 10 countries that are persecuting Christians, for example, are Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, countries in which we've had poor leadership in the past. I was wondering what you would do as president to help combat religious persecution.
Well, first off is to make sure that everybody understands that that's absolutely unacceptable for the United States of America because of our heritage, our Constitution, and the principles upon which our country was founded. We need to speak out. I think the president has done very little speaking out about the fact that ISIS, for instance, who he in his State of the Union address called just a bunch of guys, no offense, with beards, on the backs of trucks with guns. His words, not mine, okay? Minimizing these folks. He's not talking about the fact that, you know, these are folks that are running around the region beheading Christians purely for their religious beliefs. We need to understand that the war on terrorism that we have going on right now is, in fact, a religious war. It is a war where, and we're not waging it, they're waging it to try to impose their religious values upon all of us through violence. And America has always stood against that, and we need to continue to stand boldly against it. That's why I've been so concerned about the president's ambivalent policy on Israel. Because when you don't say to Iran, it is unacceptable, and we will not have any agreements or even any conversations with you until you recognize Israel's right to exist, when they put forward the type of anti-Semitic, violent rhetoric that they put forward in Iran towards Israel, that also hurts Christians. That hurts peaceful Muslims. That hurts Hindus, and that hurts anyone who feels as if they should have the right to freely practice their religion. Speak about not only how we speak, but that we choose to speak about it. And this president has remained largely silent about it for reasons that I don't completely understand. Because it is an offense. Those type of offenses are offenses to everyone who believes that religion should be able to be practiced as you see fit. Not imposed upon you, but as you see fit. And so those are the kind of things that I would speak out against and would make very clear to those who are religious bigots that we would speak out against those countries and use the power and the majesty of standing behind the presidential seal to say those words. Ronald Reagan knew how to do that very, very well. And we need to get back to that. We have a president right now who just unfortunately has been unwilling to do it. I would not be unwilling to do it. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. You're a Lancer? That's, by the way, the mascot of our high school. And you know, this drives my staff crazy because I will tell you that no matter where I go in this country, and I was in 28 different states when I was running the Republican Governors Association, campaigning for other governors, and almost every place we went, someone came up to me and said, I went to your high school. And it drove my staff crazy. They're like, you people are everywhere. We're everywhere. But we're just talented and fabulous looking, and people want us all over the country. So welcome to a fellow Lancer. Yeah.
Starting in New Hampshire, my thoughts, your thoughts about global warming. As president, how would you address it?
Sure. I think I'm one of the candidates in this race who's not been ambivalent about this. I believe climate change is real, and I believe human activity contributes to it. Now, the question is, what do we do? I think the president's climate change agreement in Paris is an abject failure. And here's why. Those rules apply to us immediately in 2015. They don't apply to China till 2030. So China can pollute unabated for 15 more years. And for any of you who have ever been to China or spoken to folks who have been to China, there are days in China where folks have to walk around cities with surgical masks on because they can't breathe. Interestingly, I met with the vice chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. It was about a year and a half or so ago. He was making a visit to New Jersey and asked for a meeting with me. So I had him to the governor's mansion. And one of the things I asked him in our meeting was about this issue. And I said, what's your plan? What's the party's plan there for this? And he said, through an interpreter, of course, he said to me, we've met with your great leaders at Johnson & Johnson in New Jersey, and we've told them to accelerate their plans for a cure for lung cancer. That doesn't sound like a group of folks who are looking to pollute less anytime soon. That was his answer. I sat across this table thinking, like, is this the interpreter, like, playing games with me here? Or, like, did this guy actually say that? So we do not yet have a willing partner in China on this issue. And so I'm not going to tie America's hands behind its back economically. More regulations that this poor guy's going to have to comply with and everything else to make him even less competitive with the rest of the world. But there are things we can do that won't do that. For instance, in New Jersey, 53% of all our electricity is generated by nuclear power. Now listen, everybody, 3 Mile Island was a long time ago. A long time ago, and we need to get over it. I've been operating in our state, in the most densely populated state in the nation, multiple nuclear reactors for 4 decades without incident. And it doesn't add to our carbon footprint, and it's a cheaper way of producing reliable electricity. We need to have states start looking at nuclear again as an option. Second, in New Jersey, we're now the 3rd largest solar energy producing state in the nation, only behind Arizona and California. Bring that to a bar in Keene tonight. You'll get some free drinks. You get some free drinks tonight in Keene. Let me tell you, baby. You let them guess Arizona and California. Give them that one as an upfront, but guess it for number 3. Let me tell you, if you get 1 drink for every guess, they're going to need to roll you home by the time they get to New Jersey. But we did it because early on we made a significant investment with the private sector in the technology to make the technology affordable for businesses and homes in New Jersey. Now we've even been able to lower those incentives because it's affordable. And by 2020, 22% of New Jersey's electricity will be generated by solar. Now, we still have natural gas plants there, and we're building 3 new ones because with the access we have to the Marcellus Shale, it's lowered our energy costs, and we want to have that reliable source as well. My point is, I was out in Iowa for a while. You drive in Iowa, and there are wind turbines for as far as the eye can see. Now, that works for Iowa because they have big, open expanses of land, flat, even. It works for them. If we put wind turbines on land in New Jersey, there would not only be dead birds, there would be dead people, right? You can't have that, right? So you got to know what you can use and what you can do, and I think each state should be able to make their own decisions in that regard. But we need to encourage them to continue to explore alternatives, and we need to make it worthwhile for them to do it, because if it's economically worthwhile, people will do it. But on the larger global side, unless China is convinced to buy in, we are going to be presented with a real Hobson's choice. It's going to be, do we tie our hands behind our back and hurt ourselves economically by doing this on our own, or do we ignore it as well? I think there is a midpoint. And the midpoint is to encourage these things but not require them, to make them affordable, and then to try to continue to work with the Chinese to bring them around to the idea that it really is just one planet, and we should all be trying to do the best we can to keep it healthy. This woman's worried about my health, and I'm worried, and you're worried about the planet's health. So they need to address those issues like I addressed mine. So that's the way I would deal with it. Yes, ma'am.
As you know, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has the ability to approve or deny certificates for new infrastructure, and especially with regard to gas and oil. They also, in having that ability, can pave the way for eminent domain. And eminent domain affects tens of thousands or more families.
Yep.
Given that the commission has only ever denied one certificate in this myriad of applications that they've had, how do you feel about their due diligence and having the president be able to appoint these commissioners? What would you be looking for in the commission?
Well, first off, what I'd be looking for is to devolve this authority back to the states. I think that the folks in your individual state should be able to make the judgment about whether you want to build a pipeline or you don't. Now, I built pipelines in New Jersey, so I don't want to be disingenuous with you, okay? I've done them because I think it's important. It's lowered energy costs in our state by about 9% over the last 18 months. And I think that's important, especially for folks on fixed incomes who are paying a lot for energy and maybe shouldn't. But I also recognize that there has to be a balance and a determination, and I think that determination should not be made by federal bureaucrats, no matter who appoints them. But if the pipeline's coming through your community, then your state should be able to determine who does it and if they do it. And that's so that you can have the greatest impact possible on your environment, your cost of energy, the type of state you want to have and live in. And I think that it frustrates people when those decisions are made at the federal level because they feel so totally detached from them, and they ask the question you did, which is, what do they know? What due diligence did they do? What do they really know about the circumstances in New Hampshire versus Montana or Wyoming or New Jersey or Florida? Do they really know enough, and who's pulling their strings? Who's giving them the information? Because they're getting information from a distance. And so you want to know who's getting them that information. I would want to solve this problem this way. Get out of the business. Let the local environmental and energy commissioners in the individual states hold those hearings, make those fact findings, and make those determinations. That's what I would do. Yes, sir.
Governor, thank you for coming again to Keene.
You're welcome.
Could you speak to the place that the United States holds on the world stage today? Under this president, our allies don't trust us, our enemies don't fear us. How would you address that?
Well, I think you put it very well in terms of what I think the attitude is of the world towards the United States of America right now. This is a president who came in saying that, he thought that America was the cause of violence in the world. And he thought if we pulled back from Iraq and we pulled back from Afghanistan and we gave some nice speeches and we told people we liked them, that somehow the world would be a more peaceful place. And I think what we've discovered is that there are fewer democracies today than the day Barack Obama came into office. What we've discovered is that there's more violence today than the day Barack Obama came into office. And it is because of those two factors that you talked about, allies not trusting us, adversaries not fearing us. So how do you fix that? First, I think you have to work on the alliance side. If you don't work on the alliance side, you've got no firm foundation to work off of. So I've said that when people ask me what are the first 3 or 4 things you'll do in your first 100 days, that's a very popular question in New Hampshire for me. One of the things I tell them is that I would make a number of phone calls in the first 100 days. The Prime Minister of Canada, the President of Mexico, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, and the Prime Minister of Israel. And I invite each of them to come and see me individually in the first 100 days. And the first couple of hours that I met with them, I just allowed them to vent about how they've been treated over the last 8 years and the problems that it's created for them and the frustrations and all the rest. Then after that, I'd say to them, okay, we're done with that now. Let's have some conversations about what our shared strategic vision can be going forward about the hot spots in the world and what we're going to do together to fix them, And one thing that they would know about me for sure, based both upon my reputation and what they heard that day, is that I'm a man of my word. And if I tell them I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, whether it's politically popular or not. And if I tell them I'm not going to do something, I won't, no matter how politically popular it may look. And I think that's what they need to know about America. I had an ambassador of a friendly Arab nation tell me in the last few months that America, when there was a problem, that America used to be their 911 call. But now when they call 911, they get voicemail. That's what our allies around the world think of us. Our adversaries are seeing a weakened military, an overextended military, a president who's unwilling to pull the trigger, and allies who are not necessarily standing with us because of the issues we just talked about. So they're pushing us. Now, Vladimir Putin's in Crimea, Ukraine. He's in Syria now. And this is a guy whose economy has fallen to pieces. He's got oil in the $20 range. And that's the main driver of his economy. His military is falling apart, yet he's pushing us around. Why? Because he thinks he can get away with it. It won't be hard for the next president to get him in line. You push him a little bit, he'll go back in the cage because he knows that he can't compete with us. He cannot compete with us from a military perspective, even today. But we're allowing him to push us around because this president just does not like conflict. Does not like conflict and doesn't know how to resolve conflict. China the same way. That's a very important relationship for us over the course of the next century. Economically, militarily, strategically. We need to have a long talk with the Chinese about what kind of relationship they really want to have. I'd be happy to have a good relationship with the Chinese, but not if they continue to engage in cyber warfare, not if they continue to manipulate the currency, not if they continue to build islands in the South China Sea to use as military bases to intimidate our allies. So you need to have some very direct conversations. And as for the mullahs in Iran, I would tell them three things really, really quickly. First, you're never, ever going to get a nuclear weapon on my watch, even if I have to use military action to stop it. Second, as I said before, no agreements or missed discussions with them until they recognize Israel's right to exist. And third, that I think they're an illegitimate regime and there should be regime change. Not that I would send soldiers over there to do it, but those folks within the country who are oppressed and who want to revolt, they should know that if they do that, the United States will stand with them, not with their theocracy government. So that's the way I think you deal with our major adversaries in the world. And our allies need once again to believe that America is good to its word and not affected by polls every day. And that's the way I would approach those things.
From my own standpoint, one of the big issues in our political system today is politicians are more focused on getting reelected rather than serving the people that elected them. Our founding fathers envisioned citizen statesmen. We had career politicians. From the office of president, what could you do, what would you do to put some meaningful term limits in place?
Well, the only thing you can do is to use the bully pulpit to advocate for it, because obviously term limits will have to be a constitutional amendment. And that can only come from the Congress and then approved by the states. But I do think that when Congress has a 13% job approval rating, that it is about time to consider some changes there. And the only thing that I'm really wondering is who are the 13%? Right? Who are the people who are looking at that going, hey, yeah, give me some more of that. I'd like more of that. And now we're thinking about nominating as our party's presidential candidate 2 different people who are from an institution that 87% of the American people don't like. Seems kind of interesting choice for us, but nonetheless. I'd advocate for term limits, and I've advocated for term limits for a long time. The governor of New Jersey is term limited. The president of the United States is term limited. Why are we dispensable and members of Congress are indispensable? Of course, because they're not. So I would limit it to 12 years. 6 terms in the House, 2 terms in the Senate. That's it. If you can't get done what you got sent to Washington to do in 12 years, then it's time to go home anyway. I mean, you can't imagine in New Jersey, I've got a guy who's just beginning his 44th year in the state legislature. 44th year. He got into the legislature when he was 25. He's now 69. You know what I say to him? Go home, man. Go home. 44 years. That's somebody who's obsessed with the title and not with actually doing anything, but with the title. But I think the only way for the president to do this is put heat on the Congress and for you to put heat on the Congress, because they're going to want to vote term limits for themselves. But it's something that we need to have done, because with that and gerrymandering of districts, the Congress is just gridlocked brutally. and not putting the interest of the American people first, but putting their self-interest first, no question. Yes, sir.
My name is John Thurl. I'm from Keene. There is one more way to get a proposed amendment to the Constitution. That is a convention of states under Article 5.
Yep.
But my question is about land use. The federal government, through the Fish and Wildlife Service, wants to purchase a significant amount of additional land in the Connecticut River watershed, including here in Keene and surrounding areas in the Ashwellet watershed. Should the federal government be buying more land when the budget is not balanced?
Well, I'm not looking for the federal government to be a bigger landowner than it is already. We have significant lands all throughout this country that the federal government owns. I don't know about this specific proposal in detail, so I can't speak to the, to the legitimacy of that specific proposal. But I do think that the idea that the federal government needs to buy more land, they'd have to have a really good reason from my perspective, and I can't think of a compelling reason at the moment for the federal government to have to do it. So I'll look into the Connecticut River Basin issue.
Silvio Conti Wildlife Preserve, they want to expand it, almost double it.
Well, this is part of this president's agenda too, and so this is part of what I'm sure he's trying to develop as his legacy. I think his legacy is basically a failed Obamacare and an awful foreign policy. But if he wants to add the Silvio Conti Wildlife Preserve, I guess that's part of what he's attempting to do. I don't think that we need to be buying more land across the country. I think we have plenty of open space in the country already to have that open space enjoyed by lots of people. And I'll look into that one specifically, though, so that between now and Tuesday, I can give you a specific answer on the Silvio Conti issue. But in general, my philosophy is we don't need to be buying more land. Just don't. Yes, sir, in the back.
It's very easy to knock down Obamacare, as you did here.
Yep.
For someone like me that's going out to start up a small business, something like Obamacare really can be a lifeline. Because, I'm not tied to a job just because of the health insurance, and I have pre-existing conditions, so I wouldn't have been able to buy insurance on my own, even though I was on to the old system. So if you can you tell me about your health care system plan and what you want to try to either get rid of Obamacare and start from scratch or build off of it? And if you wanted to get rid of it, how would you actually work with Democrats to get something done?
Well, first off, I would get rid of Obamacare, and here's why. Because I think for most people, and if you talk to this small businessman up here, it's not a lifeline. It's an anchor. It's an anchor. Now, are there some good things about Obamacare? Sure. Someone like you for a pre-existing condition being covered? Sure. For some kids who want to stay on their parents' insurance policies till they're 26, that's good. But the fact is that we don't need a national system to do that. We just don't. What I would do is this. I would get rid of Obamacare, and then within a year, during that 1-year transition period, each state would be mandated to create their own health insurance policy inside their own state. So residents in New Hampshire could decide, what are the most important elements of a New Hampshire health plan? Would pre-existing conditions be covered? Decide it inside New Hampshire. Would kids be able to stay on their parents' policies till they're 26? Decide it in New Hampshire. What other aspects of New Hampshire healthcare is challenging and would you want addressed? Do you want to buy insurance over state lines in New Hampshire? You could decide that. Do you want insurance to be portable? So if you do get insurance from an employer that you like, that if you move from that employer, it won't be a question of losing your health insurance. It'll be take your health insurance with you and let your new employer pay what part of that insurance that they were willing to pay for, and you pay for the rest. I just don't believe that a national system is the way to go here. And I think people have seen that it isn't. The 3 primary promises of Obamacare were, if you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. And prices will be lower. Well, that's 0 for 3. And even if you're a Mets fan, 0 for 3 is bad. All right? And so I don't want to eliminate the government's ability to be involved in helping to solve this problem. But I also believe in the Constitution. And the 10th Amendment, which we've talked already about today, says that any powers which are not specifically delineated in this document revert back to the states. Well, I've read the Constitution cover to cover, and health care is not in there. And the fact is, let the states decide. How could there be a system that works for New Hampshire and New Jersey? New Hampshire about the same size. I mean, look at these two states, right? I got the two pins here, right? Here we are. We're about the same size geographically, roughly. Yet you have 1.3 million people, and we have 8.9 million people. The challenges that are confronted in New Jersey as a highly urbanized, most ethnically diverse state in the nation are different than the challenges that you face here in New Hampshire. Why not trust the governor and the legislature in New Hampshire? It wouldn't be optional. They'd have to make a decision and establish a plan within 1 year, because if they didn't, they'd have to stay on Obamacare, which I don't think they'd want to do. So from my perspective, let them decide it and let you have the input. You have a much greater opportunity to have input to your state reps, to your state senator, than you do to the Department of Health and Human Services or the President of the United States. So I would not abandon any of the things that you're talking about, but I'd want everybody to know that if you have those kind of coverages, here's what it costs. And then people can make their judgments. So I think that New Hampshire can handle this really well, as could the 49 other states, and not have a federal solution and a huge federal bureaucracy that Obamacare has created that is just driving cost. The other thing we know is that United Healthcare, which is the biggest insurer in Obamacare, is now saying they're getting out because they can't make money. Well, why can't they make money? They can't make money because they're saying this is what's happening. People go into Obamacare and buy it right before they need to have a major procedure. They then have the major procedure, and then they cancel their insurance, and they get a rebate based on a pro rata refund of their premium. People are hopping in and out of healthcare when they know they have a problem and need it. And so it's becoming a loss leader for United Healthcare. This system just doesn't work, and we need to have the states be able to make those judgments on their own, and that's what I would do. So I would not be in abandonment of our health care obligations, but I would devolve that health care obligation down to the states to let them handle it, because they can deal with, and you can deal with that best then on the local level, not up at the national level. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Not to go negative, but Flint, Michigan, that's a terrible problem. I know in New Jersey because it's all pretty okay problem. What would you advise for the situation of the governor, or what is the role of the federal government in a problem like that, which obviously is very serious?
Federal government has to come in and help. You know, if you have children getting lead poisoning from water, you need to go in and help. And I think that, you know, we're still going to find out as time evolves here, you know, what the role of the state government was. It appears that the local government made some really bad decisions about their water supply, some of which was driven by them trying to get some savings. Some of it was an interim period between their old water supply and a new water supplier they were having. But nonetheless, there's no excuse for feeding people unsafe water. And so for the governor, I think he's doing the right thing now, which is to take the bull by the horns, get people safe water, and ask the federal government to come in and help. There's no question when there's a health crisis of that magnitude, when people are in trouble, that the federal government has a role to play in getting them out of trouble. When our state was hit by Hurricane Sandy and we had 365,000 homes lost in 24 hours, that's nothing any one state can cope with by itself. That's why we have a federal government. And most Americans, I think, believe, whatever misgivings they may have about government, that when we're in crisis, Americans stand for other Americans. And the federal government is essentially the embodiment of our country. We pay for it, and they need to go and help people who are in desperate need of help. And so I think there's an absolutely appropriate role for the federal government in Flint, Michigan. They've got to get this problem solved. The governor has to be a part of the solution. It sounds like he's trying to be. And so, but the smartest thing he did was to ask the federal government for help. You should not try to deal with these kind of things on your own. Deal with them on your own, you're going to wind up having it take a lot longer, and you may not have the resources you need to be able to fix the problem in as quick a time as you'd like to. So I think there is an appropriate role for the federal government. If I were president, I would be calling the governor of Michigan and offering that help before he asked. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a student at Keene State College, right down the street.
Yep.
And Hillary Clinton has been getting her supporters by telling college kids what they want to hear, that she's going to try to lower student debt. I don't really know how realistic that is. talk to us a little bit about like how that's just like not realistic? It's just some people don't want to hear it.
Well, there's no question that when she and Bernie Sanders say that they're going to make your education free, that you know that's not going to happen. And that if it did, that there would be such a huge increase in taxes that when you got out of college, you'd have very little money left in your paycheck to be able to do anything else but pay for the free thing you got. Sounds kind of crazy, right? So here's what I'd say. I have 4 things I would do to deal with the tuition and student debt issue because it's a real problem. And Mary Pat and I have 4 children, and 2 of them are in college right now, right? So we're feeling it. I mean, our son's a senior at Princeton. Our daughter's a sophomore at Notre Dame. So yeah, you got it, buddy. $122,500 this year, just for those 2 tuitions. So what do? I think there's 4 things. First, when you do take student loans out, you should be able to refinance them. Right now, you're not allowed to. It's obscene. We're making money off you. We shouldn't be making money off you. If you can take out that student loan and then you can go to a bank locally here in Keene or someplace else in New Hampshire and you can get them to refinance that loan at a lower rate and you can pay back the principal to the government, you should be allowed to do that. We shouldn't be making money off of you. This is about helping you get an education so that you can be a more productive member of society, not about loading you down so we can make a few points on your loan. Secondly, and I think that's a realistic thing to do. Secondly, I think we should offer folks coming out of college a national service option, meaning that you can go into national service, not military service necessarily, but other national service for a period of time, and that for each year that you're in national service, we'll work off a percentage of your debt so that you can go and do something bigger than your own self-interest, but also then when you get done with that, you either have no debt or a little bit of debt left, and then you can make a decision about what you want your career to be based upon what you feel in your heart, not what check you have to get in order to pay for that. That helps to make the country a better place, and it's going to help to make you better too. On the cost side, we need to do 2 things though too. I mean, think about this. I talked about Notre Dame. You know, my daughter loves Notre Dame. She loves it. When she first got in and decided she was going to go, she told me, "Don't worry, Dad, I won't become one of those obnoxious Notre Dame people." She's now become one of those obnoxious Notre Dame people, right? She sends me pictures from there all the time when she's walking around campus, pictures of her friends at the football games, pictures of her friends by, Touchdown Jesus and First Down Moses and, Stonehenge and all the different spots they have on the campus at Notre Dame. She loves the place. But when we got a letter this summer from Notre Dame saying that tuition was going up 3.9% in a 1% world and telling us that that was the lowest annual tuition increase at Notre Dame in 40 years. If we made those decisions like we make every other decision about how to spend money, like we'd call Sarah downstairs and say to her, "Listen, we just don't think that Notre Dame's a value anymore, so we're going to send you to another school that's less expensive." Now, what year are you in college?
I'm a junior.
You're a junior and you are? Okay. So you can relate to this. My daughter's just a year behind you. How do you think that conversation would go? Right? I kind of think that the following things would be involved at some point, right? Crying, stamping your feet upstairs, right? Slamming the door shut, and there would be the use of like, "You're ruining my life and I hate you," and at some point during that conversation, right? After that happened, Mary Pat and I would sit at the kitchen table, and you know what we do? We try to figure out how we could send her back. Because what we want for you more than anything else are 2 things at this stage of your life. We want you to get a good education, and we want you to be happy. If we get those 2 things, if I hear from my daughter that she's doing well at school and she's happy, I go to sleep at night. If she's unhappy or her grades aren't good and things aren't going well, then I don't sleep at night. So here's the problem with that. Not only do we know that, the colleges know it too. They know we're not making decisions on that basis. They know they got us, right? So here you guys are today. You're juniors at Keene State, and you both have Keene State stuff on, right? You got sweatshirts on, fleece on, right? We wear this stuff all the time. You go around to any one of these town hall meetings, and I will tell you, not only just college students, but parents and other folks, they're wearing this stuff all the time. Why are they wearing it? They're wearing it because there's more than just a connection to it. There's an emotional connection to where you go to school, and so the colleges play on that. So how do we fix it? First thing I'd do is, let's say you went to a restaurant in Keene here for lunch, the two of you, and you order lunch and the check comes and you turn the check over and it says food, $25. You'd like call the waitress over and say, excuse me, could you like write out to be able to pay for what we ate, right? I just paid the Princeton bill 2 weeks ago. And it was, oh, okay, sure, yeah. I didn't ask a thing. That's what they're spending our money on. Because if they told us what they're money on, they'd be embarrassed and we'd be outraged. Now, let me ask you a question. This will be an interesting test. Do you have a rock climbing wall at Keene State? Thank God. I can tell you, you are the. Now, you say to me, like, Chris, what are you? For my daughter. My daughter's like, yeah, we have two rock. Well, you see, you just took my. Right? Because here's the thing. And UNH has rock climbing walls. I said to the kids at UNH, you have rocks, man. You're the granite state. For God's sake, there's rocks outside. Climb the rocks outside. Why do you need rocks on campus? It's just an example of what college is. The mentality is, I want something, I get it. I build it. Right? It's crazy. So we need to make them list what they're spending the money on. Like, who are the 44, vice presidents for paperwork? Where are the monuments they're building to some, alum's ego on campus? Right? You see these things, right? And we want to know what they're spending our money on because it would cause a real conversation to happen. Secondly, on that side of it, I want you to be able to unbundle your bill. I want you to be able to pick the things that you're going to use and pay for those and only those. Now, that will not only drive your cost down, but it also is a market force on something that has no market force on it. So if 98% of the people, if they put a rock climbing wall on the list and 98% of you didn't pay for it, it's not getting built. Now, your question should be to me after this, like, well, how? How are you going to get them to do this? Here's how we're going to get them to do it. If they don't do it, we're not going to let them participate in the federal student loan program or the federal student grant program. Right? So you want to use taxpayer money, that's fine. We want to help you, but only if you're going to tell us what you're spending our money on and allow students to make choices about what they want to use, what the facilities are that they'll use, the academics that they'll use, the extracurriculars that they'll use, and we'll pay for those. But we're not going to pay for all of this excess. So thank you. So I think that's the way to do it, and I think if we did that stuff that way, we'd give you a break on some of the costs and your family, and we'd still have options available, but not have all these decisions made by emotion.
Speaker fees.
Yes, speaker fees. Yeah, they're like the ones that Hillary got and others. Yeah, big money for those. Some people call it white collar crime, but we'll just leave it at that. Thank you for your question. It's really good. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a follow-up to the healthcare question.
Yeah.
I'm from New Jersey originally.
Yep. Where from?
Franklin Lake.
Okay.
And now I live in Vermont. And, we tried the state health, we had Green Mountain Care.
Right.
And it didn't work, it wasn't economically viable. How do you respond to that and to the healthcare responsibilities that you're putting on the states? What if the states can't handle that, which clearly we can?
Well, listen, I think that Green Mountain Care didn't work for a number of reasons. I'm a little bit familiar with it, but the bigger issue is that it didn't work because it wasn't operating in a like system across the whole country, right? So Green Mountain Care is excised out in Vermont. It's the only state that's doing it. And so they don't have the ability to go buy over state lines, do other things because no one else is participating like they are. What I'm saying is take a national system and devolve it into a state system where every state is doing it. So if every state is doing it, the ability for people to be able to participate and to be able to have different options and different things that Green Mountain Care couldn't afford because they were carrying that burden all by themselves in Vermont. This would be a system that you could make deals with New Jersey if you wanted to provide certain things. You can make deals with neighboring states to do it. The problem is that nationally, they're not carrying the burden either. You're carrying the burden. The price is going up and up and up. And so the idea that somehow the national government is carrying this burden, they're not. In fact, the burden is even higher today in terms of healthcare costs than it was before Obamacare. So what I'd say to you is that let me start off by saying there's no perfect solution to this, right? So a lot of it is how you're going to go about it philosophically, what you think the flaws are in the current system, and whether you think that the system you're going to substitute in has fewer flaws. Not perfect, but has fewer flaws. I think the system has fewer flaws than the national system. You want to follow up?
Wouldn't you be forced to federally subsidize states like Vermont that couldn't, be part of the?
No, I don't think you'd be forced to federally subsidize them. I think that what you would do at the state level is to allow for certain types of incentives at the state level that people could have, tax incentives for them to work off of whether it's their state income tax or in New Hampshire where they don't have one of those, with other types of tax incentives. But no, and listen, you could decide at the federal level, I wouldn't do it, but you could decide at the federal level to allow certain tax deductions for that as well, and to change that based upon how the system develops and evolves. But here's one thing I know for sure, we'll be changing this over and over again. Because each time we put a new system in place, we're going to find flaws in it, and we're going to have to continue to evolve and get better at it. The illusion that Obamacare gave us that this was going to be the fix. I'm not trying to tell you that my plan is the fix that will never have to be changed. But I do think that we're in a much better place if we're letting states handle this, because then you, in New Hampshire, in Vermont, can make the decision about what isn't working. There's a great saying, I don't know who said it, I don't remember who said it, about democracy, that democracy is not a system that prevents you from making mistakes. It's just the best system to correct those mistakes once they're made. And so having that down at the lower level, at the state level, allows you the opportunity to correct the mistakes much easier than you see what we're trying to correct now at the national level. It's just because no one wants to come off the dime, right? The president doesn't want to give an inch because then he'll feel like if he gives an inch, someone will take a yard. And the Republicans don't want to give an inch because they feel like if they do, that he's going to roll them. Get it out of Washington's hands. The great thing about governors are that we're much more practical. Because you know us, and we have to answer to you. It's not like being in the White House behind a big gate. We're out here, and we've got to give you answers. And if we don't, we hear from you, as do your state legislators. So that's why I just think philosophically it's a better approach. It's not the perfect approach, but I think it's a better one. I understand, though, and I'm pretty familiar with the Green Mountain experiment, which, between Governor Dean and others who came after him, it became a very difficult thing to deal with. Yes, ma'am.
So you've talked a little about eminent domain, and I think that's a great illustration for a human situation of eminent domain. I'm talking about abortion, conversation where two rights are colliding. I think the Democrats like to present themselves as the ones who are sticking up for the poor, the woman who finds herself in this situation. But I think there's another life in here that has much come up in the news, and I wonder if you could tell us your position on that issue and how to sort of get people to look past the rhetoric and maybe consider some logic.
Yeah, listen, I'm pro-life, and I haven't always been. Back in the mid-1990s, I would tell you that I would have called myself kind of an unthinking pro-choicer. I knew abortion was never going to be an issue in my life, so I quite frankly just didn't spend the time to care. I got out of college and law school. I was busy. I was building a career, and someone asked me, I would have said, yeah, okay. I mean, it's a woman's choice, fine, great. And I wouldn't have thought much about it. The day my heart and my mind got changed on it was when I went to the 3-month prenatal visit for my second child. Now, I don't remember where I was for the 3-month prenatal visit for my first child, but I wasn't there. So this was for Sarah, the girl we were talking about, who's now 19 years old at Notre Dame. And I went, Mary Pat was working at the time as well, and so we met at the doctor's office. And I went into the examining room, and she's 3 months, so she wasn't even showing at this point. And he started the examination, and he put the Doppler on her abdomen to listen, not a scan, but the Doppler. And I could hear as loud and as true as anything I'd ever heard that heartbeat. And I got in the car to drive back to work, and I thought to myself, you know, under my position on abortion, I'd say that's not alive. And man, I heard that heartbeat. It's alive. And I just said to myself, I can't live with myself with that position. It's not right. And so I changed. I was, summer of 1995, I think, because Sarah was born summer, fall 95, because she was born in February of 96. And so ever since then, I've been pro-life. Now, I believe in exceptions for rape and incest and life of the mother because I believe that those are acts of self-defense. And that if, in fact, a woman is a victim of those things, or her life, not her health, but her life is in danger, and we have to choose, then the woman should be able to choose her own life. But I will tell you that, to me, I think the way we have to deal with this to get to the other part of your question is that we have to speak about this in a way that is positive and accepting and not so negative. Like if I'm having a conversation with someone who's pro-choice and I say, I'm pro-life, do you have a position? And you say, yeah, I'm pro-choice. And I say, well, you're a baby killer and you're going to hell. It's kind of a conversation ender, pretty much, right? And we need to recognize that there are people who either haven't thought this issue all the way through or people of good conscience who disagree. But I'm an example of the fact that minds and hearts can be changed. But I wasn't changed by somebody, holding a protest sign outside my house and screaming at me. I was changed by a circumstance where I finally, in my mind, understood the nature of life. And I understood it because it was a life that I helped to create. And so for me, what I say to folks now is I'm pro-life, but I'm also pro-life for the whole life, by the way. Like, I'm not just pro-life for the 9 months in the womb. In fact, the 9 months in the womb, I'd suggest to you, are the easy part. Now, of course, that's coming from someone who's never carried for 9 months. I acknowledge that. But I think it's much easier in those 9 months. It gets much harder when they come out, right? To be pro-life, right? Then they're starting to make decisions and do other things, and you're saying to yourself, like, I'm going to be pro-life for this child no matter what. But I'm pro-life for the 16-year-old heroin addict on the floor of the county lockup. Her life is precious too. I'm pro-life for the 45-year-old man who gets addicted to painkillers and winds up not being able to be in control of his life. I'm pro-life for the 85-year-old man who some people say should have the option of assisted suicide, but I say no. God gets to determine when that life ends, not me. So part of what I think for those of us who are pro-life, I think we need to talk about it in a greater context than just those 9 months. Those 9 months are vitally important because without them, nothing else happens. But so is the rest of the life too. And so when I talk about being pro-life, I tell people that I'm a convert to it 21 years ago. But I also tell them that I want them to think about the entire life. And I think if we talk about it that way, we broaden the appeal of the issue and we open up more ears. And I think when you open up more ears, you have a chance to convince them, a chance. And sometimes you may and sometimes you may not. But it's at least a chance then. And I'm somebody who will continue to talk about it and talk about it in that way. That's how I came to the position I have and how I'll continue to talk about it when I'm president. So thanks for raising that. All right, my staff is telling me I can take one more question, which means I will take two. And the reason for that is I want them to remain with the clear understanding that I am the boss. And I will tell you, you laugh about that, but you know what running for president is like? Running for president is being surrounded every day by people who are significantly younger than you, who tell you where to go and what to do every minute of the day. So the only place I'm safe from the tyranny of the young is right here inside this circle when I have the microphone in my hand. So we'll take two questions. We have that gentleman here, and then we had you here. So we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Christie, and welcome to Keene, New Hampshire.
Thank you.
This is one of the 2 copies of the Constitution that I carry with me everywhere I go, literally. The other is from the Cato Institute, but this one is signed Maggie Hassan wants Kelly Ayotte Senate seat. No way, Maggie. One issue in particular is medical cannabis, which I want to leave that aside. What is so important for me, which is causing me to speak up, is I need to correct some misinformation. I matriculated at Keene State College in 1998 as an environmental studies major, so I know what I'm talking about. The Silvio O. Conti Federal Fish and Wildlife Refuge is literally decades old. It had nothing to do with Obama. Whatever's happening with it right now, again, has nothing to do with Obama. And to see Obama bashing and Obama blaming connected with that, well, you know, I had to say something. There's a couple of other issues, something that you said today. You want to put Putin back in a box. Years ago, in a letter to the editor, I wrote regarding NAFTA, and that was Clinton, Bill Clinton. I think he's got a relative in his race currently. You want to put Putin back in the box. You want to be leader of the free world, president of the United States of America. You talked about your health. I know my health as a result of decades of Tai Chi, Beaver yoga, dance therapy. I'm not sure that you're man enough to be president of the United States of America. If I'm Putin, and you're talking to me, no wonder America and Obama is being treated by Putin. I don't think there's a toughness there. And I'm not sure there's a toughness in you. Because I'm imagining, okay, if I'm Putin and I have to deal with you, dude, you've seen Putin, you know his thing. Well, I'm an American, and I'm a registered independent.
Is there a question some here in our near future? I just want to get to the question.
I'm applying for a job. I'll wrap it right up. Thank you. I'm here partially as a strategic compliance integrity field investigator working with Office of Special Disability Rehabilitation Services under the White House Military Office. Now, the White House Military Office actually exists, and I can get back to your staff. I'm looking forward to shaking your hand, and I realize this question's a little rambling and it's all over the place. You want to be leader of the free world. If you can't handle me in Keene, New Hampshire, then you can't handle the White House, but this is a friendly crowd. With some exceptions here and there, medical cannabis, Silvio, Greg, there's some things.
Okay, listen.
Give him a
I'm
chance to talk.
listen. You know, I'm so confused. And it may be, and it may be that it's not that I'm not tough enough to be president. It may be that I'm just not smart enough, because I don't understand a damn thing you just said. But that's the beauty of the New Hampshire Town Hall. You never know. You never know what you're going to get. I will tell you, I've been accused of many things over my career. Many things over my career. Some rightfully, some wrongly. But the one thing I've never been accused of is not being tough enough. Folks have had a lot of different interesting things to say about me. That's never been one of them. So it's another one of these experiences I've had in the New Hampshire primary from a guy who actually has like a button with my face on it. It's a completely confusing, disorienting thing. But you know what? You've helped to make this day very memorable for me. So I want to thank you for doing that. God bless. Go ahead, sir.
Governor, what qualifications would you look for in your vice presidential selection? Executive, legislative, and what responsibilities other than
Checking my pulse.
checking your pulse and your regulations?
Yep.
What responsibilities would you give them?
Well, three things. First off, when you name your candidate for vice president, the American people have to look at that person immediately and say, yep, that person could be president. When we've had candidates who have picked people who did not pass that test, it damages your candidacy enormously. You're never going to pick a vice president who's going to get you elected, but you can get a vice president choice that will prevent you from being elected. And so, and that will happen if people look at that person and say, that's purely a political choice, and that person has no business being president of the United States. So first is, you've got to be able to look at that person and be able to believe that the American people look at that person and say, in an emergency, that person could be president of the United States. First criteria. Second criteria is I want someone with executive experience, because I want to give that person tasks to accomplish. I don't want to just send them to funerals. I want to give them tasks to accomplish for me. And I won't be confident they can accomplish those tasks if they haven't had executive experience and know how to make things happen. So I would be looking for someone with executive experience. Third, if I don't like the person, I probably won't. And we can't have a vice president who doesn't know everything that's going on in the presidency. Because if they don't know, and something were to happen to me, if this lady's concerns about my health actually turned out to be true, then it'll turn out that we put our country behind the 8 ball because the vice president won't be prepared to step in and do the job. That there'll be enormous on-the-job training that needs to be done, and we can't have that. So those are the 3 criteria I'd look for. Person immediately, based upon their experience and the way they present themselves, could be seen as president. I'd like someone with executive experience, and I'd like to have someone that I like and enjoy working with, because if I do, then I'll make that person a full partner, and if I do, that serves the country the best. So those are the 3 things I'd be looking for. All right. So let's wrap up with 2 things. First, thank you. Thank you for coming out this morning. I appreciate it very much. One of the most encouraging things about the New Hampshire primary is this part of the process. You know, that you all for the last year have been taking your time to sit and listen and think and judge the candidates. And I think that's incredibly encouraging for our democracy. And I'll tell you, it's incredibly encouraging as a candidate who participates in it. Second thing I want to leave you with is this. I want to tell you just a brief story from one of my trips to Iowa. It's about 5 or 6 days ago now. Mary Pat and I were in Burlington, Iowa. And we were doing a town hall meeting just like this one. And in the midst of that town hall meeting, a gentleman raised his hand to ask a question. I called on him. And he stood up and he said to me, Governor, I'd like to know what your attitude is going to be towards being commander-in-chief, how you're going to execute those responsibilities. He said, because in 4 months, we're sending our oldest son to be deployed to Iraq. And he sat down, and I looked next to him, and his wife was sitting to his left, and she was crying. And at that moment, I stopped being a presidential candidate, and I started being a father. And I was thinking to myself, here it is, the most precious thing that they have in the entire world. Their child, who they've nurtured from the womb to infancy, through childhood and young adulthood. And now they're going to turn this most precious possession of theirs over to the government to go and fight for our principles in a dark and dangerous place in another part of the world. And I could see both the pain and the anguish of those parents worried for the life and the safety of their son. And like there is here today, there were a number of veterans in the room, and a few of them had hats on like that gentleman does. One of them said, guy was in his mid-90s, and his hat said World War II veteran. There was another gentleman who told me he was 82 years old, and he had the same hat on this gentleman does, Korea veteran. And then there was a third veteran who had one of those hats on, and he said Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran on his hat. And I was thinking to myself, think about the men who sent those men into war. In World War II, it was Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. For Korea, it was Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower. And for Operation Iraqi Freedom, it was George W. Bush. Now, put aside whether you have political agreements or disagreements with any of those men, I think what we could all agree on is that each one of those men were serious, sober, intelligent men who took the job of commander-in-chief extraordinarily seriously and understood that they represented us to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, and that they had an extraordinary responsibility to those parents and to those young men and women who are going to put themselves in harm's way. And so Tuesday, when you go into the voting booth, I'd like to respectfully suggest to you that what you do is imagine that you have that mother and father on either side of you, and that they're watching you when you mark that ballot. That you'd actually be able to turn to them and say, I believe, fill in the blank, whoever you fill in the blank for, is the very best person to be commander-in-chief, the very best person to lead your son into battle, the very best person to try to ensure that he comes home whole. See, because we talked about lots of important issues here today, and they're all very important, but there's none more important than that. None more important than the task of leading the most powerful military the world's ever known, and the task of being responsible for the men and women who serve in that military. Now, I'd suggest to you that there's a number of names on that ballot for Tuesday that you couldn't say out loud with a straight face to those parents. And it's a choice now. You need to choose, and choose wisely. Because that person who you pick is going to be the personification of America to the world. The way they act, the way they speak, the way they decide will symbolize for the rest of the world who we are. We are. And there are no do-overs. We pick this person. We've seen in the last 7 years what happens when we pick someone who is not ready. Now, 4 years ago, there were lots of people who wanted me to run for president, and I didn't. And the reason I didn't is because I knew in my heart I was not ready. And the only thing worse than running for president and losing is running for president and winning when you're not ready. And we've watched that for the last 7 years. We cannot make the same mistake again. A winning smile and a well-memorized speech doesn't prove that you can handle a crisis, and would not prove, I guarantee you, to those parents that you were prepared and able to care for their son. I'm ready to be president of the United States. I've been tested, and I'm ready to be president. And that's why I'm asking for your vote today. You can be, swayed by the pundits and the chattering class on television about who's going to win and who's not going to win, but New Hampshire has proven those folks wrong over and over again. This decision needs to be made on something much more important than whose yard signs you like, or who's the loudest talker, or who's the smoothest talker. It should be made based upon the decisions that are going to need to be made, and have you shown a history of being able to make those kind of decisions? If you have, then I'll be governed by whatever decision you make. Because ultimately, before I can make any of the decisions I need to make as president, you got to make your decision as to who you want there. It's up to you. And in the last 5 days here, it's not only up to you in terms of what you're going to do inside, but once you make a decision, it's up to you to talk to your friends and your family and your colleagues and tell them why you're doing what you're doing, and try to persuade them to your cause. Democracy is not a solitary activity. It is a societal activity where we all try to influence each other to get to a greater good. That's why I'm running for president, because I know we can do all that together again if you give us the chance. So thanks for letting me come back to Keene. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for the great questions. And thank you for showing up on Tuesday and making a difference for our country. It means a great deal to me. Thank you all very much.